The soft click of the lock sounded louder than any scream I had ever heard, and in that single second, the air in the room became heavier than my past, heavier than the guilt I had been running from for years. I had always believed that leaving quietly was the kindest way to go. No drama, no tears, no long explanations that would only open wounds deeper than before. Just a silent exit, a disappearing act. I thought it made me strong. I thought it made me practical. But the truth was far simpler and far uglier. I was a man who didn't know how to stay when things became real. The hallway light spilled into the room in a thin golden line, stretching across the floor like a path that was begging me to follow it. My hand had already reached the door handle, my heart already halfway outside the room, when the sound of the lock stopped everything. I turned slowly, knowing exactly what I would see before I even looked. She was standing there, leaning against the door with a calmness that felt more powerful than anger. Her eyes weren't full of rage or tears. They were full of something far more dangerous, understanding. And that understanding felt like a mirror I had avoided my whole life. I had spent years building walls around myself, brick by brick, excuse by excuse. Every relationship I had ever been in followed the same quiet pattern. Things would begin beautifully, with laughter and late-night conversations and the warm illusion of forever. But when the first storm clouds appeared, when vulnerability began knocking on the door, I would slip away before the rain ever had a chance to fall. I told myself I was protecting them from disappointment. I told myself I was saving everyone time. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was terrified of being known completely. Terrified of someone seeing the broken pieces I kept hidden behind jokes and smiles and polite distance. She had been different from the very beginning. Not louder, not brighter, not more dramatic, just different in the quietest ways. She noticed the pauses between my words. She remembered the stories I told once and never repeated. She asked questions that didn't feel invasive, but impossible to ignore. And slowly, without me realizing it, she began to understand me in ways I didn't even understand myself. That was what scared me the most. Because when someone begins to see you clearly, the idea of losing them becomes heavier than the fear of staying. And instead of facing that fear, I chose the only strategy one knew. I planned my exit. Life had not been kind in teaching me how to love. My childhood was filled with goodbyes that never came with explanations. My father left with a suitcase and a promise to call. My mother learned to smile in a way that hid her exhaustion. I grew up believing that people always left eventually, and the smartest thing you could do was leave first. Leaving meant control. Leaving meant safety. Leaving meant never having to feel the moment when someone decided you weren't worth staying for. So I became an expert at disappearing. Jobs, cities, friendships, relationships, my life was a series of beginnings that never reached their natural ending. Every new chapter felt exciting, full of possibility, until the moment it started to feel permanent. Permanence was the enemy. Permanence meant roots. And roots meant the risk of being torn out. She walked into my life at a time when I thought I had perfected my routine. I knew exactly how long to stay, exactly how much to share, exactly how to keep things light and temporary. But she had a way of stretching time. Conversations with her felt like minutes and hours at the same time. Silence with her never felt uncomfortable. It felt full. That fullness made me restless. Because fullness meant attachment. And attachment meant the possibility of loss. The night I tried to leave was not dramatic. There were no fights, no arguments, no sudden revelations. Just the quiet realization that I was beginning to imagine a future that included her in ways that felt permanent. I caught myself thinking about next year. About routines. About mornings and holidays and the ordinary moments that make a life feel shared. The moment I realized that, panic followed. Panic disguised itself as logic. It told me that I was not built for long-term love. It told me that I would eventually disappoint her. It told me that leaving now would hurt less than leaving later. And as always, I believed it. So I waited until the room fell quiet, until the night felt still enough to carry my escape unnoticed. I moved slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. My footsteps felt heavier than usual, like they knew what I was about to do. And then the lock clicked. In that moment, every past goodbye returned to me at once. Every unfinished conversation. Every unanswered message. Every person who had once asked me to stay. But this time, something felt different. This time, the silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She didn't demand explanations. Her presence alone held more weight than any argument ever could. And for the first time in my life, leaving didn't feel like strength. It felt like surrender. I realized that running had never made my life easier. It had only made it quieter. Lonelier. Smaller. For years, I had mistaken independence for isolation. I believed that needing someone made me weak. That staying made me vulnerable. That love was something fragile that would eventually break, no matter how carefully I handled it. But standing there, trapped between the door and the life I had built inside my own walls, I began to see something I had never allowed myself to see before. Maybe leaving was the easy choice. Maybe staying was the real courage. The realization didn't come as a sudden epiphany. It came slowly, like dawn creeping into a room through a crack in the curtains. Subtle. Gradual. Impossible to ignore once it arrived. For the first time, I thought about what my life actually looked like after every goodbye. The empty apartments. The half-packed boxes that never fully unpacked. The photos never framed. The memories that existed without witnesses. I had spent years protecting myself from heartbreak, only to create a life that felt heartbreakingly empty. And suddenly, the door behind me no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a wall I had built myself. The weeks that followed that night became the hardest and most transformative period of my life. Staying didn't magically fix everything. Staying didn't erase my fears. If anything, it forced me to confront them in ways I had never allowed before. I learned how uncomfortable honesty could feel. How difficult it was to admit when I didn't know how to express my emotions. How terrifying it was to share memories I had buried for years. But with every conversation, every small moment of vulnerability, the walls I had built began to crack. Not crumble dramatically, just soften, slowly, patiently. I began to understand that love wasn't about never wanting to leave. It was about choosing to stay even when leaving felt easier. The man who once measured his strength by how quickly he could walk away began measuring it by how long he could remain present. By how deeply he could listen. By how honestly he could speak. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still difficult days. Still moments when the urge to run whispered in the back of my mind. But for the first time, I didn't obey that voice immediately. I questioned it. I challenged it. And with time, its volume began to fade. I started noticing small changes in the way I experienced the world. Mornings felt warmer. Evenings felt calmer. Silence no longer felt empty, it felt shared. I realized that happiness wasn't a dramatic, cinematic moment. It was quiet and steady, built from routines and conversations and shared glances across a room. For years, I had been searching for excitement, for movement, for new beginnings. But what I had truly been searching for was the courage to remain in one place long enough to call it home. Months passed. Then a year. Then another. And one day, I stood in the same hallway where I once tried to leave. The same door stood in front of me, the same golden light stretching across the floor. But everything felt different. Because this time, I wasn't looking for an exit. I was looking forward to stepping back inside. I understood then that life doesn't ask us to be fearless. It asks us to be brave despite our fears. To choose connection despite the risk of loss. To choose love despite the possibility of heartbreak. And in that understanding, I found a kind of peace I had never known before. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment right now and tell us in the comments what part of this journey felt closest to your own life. Your words might help someone else feel less alone. Because the truth is, there are so many people quietly standing at their own doors, wondering whether to stay or leave. And sometimes, all it takes is one story to remind them that staying can change everything. If you felt the emotions in this story, please like, share, and comment to support the channel and help more people discover stories that heal hearts. And tell us, what country are you watching from? Your support means more than you know.